I'd like to welcome you to today's NBAA Thought Leadership webinar, Overcoming the Fear of Switching Maintenance Tracking Systems. We would also like to take a moment to thank Veryon for sponsoring today's webinar. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Peter Mortimer, Head of Sales and Business Development of the Americas and Asia Pacific at Veryon. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Elena. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got a really exciting lineup of industry experts who are going to share their insights and expertise in overcoming that fear of switching maintenance tracking systems. So before we begin, a few introductions. Firstly, myself, Peter Mortimer, great to be here and to meet you all. Almost 20 years in the industry, I think, and originally started as an aircraft maintenance engineer, focusing mostly on the Hawker Series 125s that I know a lot of you will be very familiar with. Those job roles range from everything from planning through to continued airworthiness, project management, and of course, getting my hands dirty and if you're familiar with the Hawkers, banging my head in the rear bay on numerous occasions. But I moved into the software side of the industry about 10 years ago, working for Veryon. I actually adopted one of Veryon's platforms as part of my previous role, and that involved implementation of that platform and moving through into now a role with the company. So started in this company in onboarding, customer success, implementing systems, and now moved into the sales side, very much kind of process-driven role, discussing during the sales cycle about how your processes work and how we can transform that into our software. So that's a little bit about me. As I said, great to meet you all. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about myself, and I'll move on now to introduce Justin Linscomb. Justin, a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Again, name's Justin Linscomb, Director of Data Quality here at Veryon. I have about 24 years in the industry as an avionics technician and A&P mechanic. Started off in the military, spent 8 years as a Black Hawk crew chief in the Army. Moved straight from there into corporate business jets, and kind of spent my career bouncing back and forth between rotary wing and fixed wing aviation. Started working in maintenance tracking programs roughly a decade ago, and alongside working QA for some major 135 operators, and coincidentally led some of these transitions from one maintenance tracking program to another, led some pretty big enterprise implementations from previous operators. So having worked with Veryon in the past, saw a lot of opportunity for growth and improvement, and decided to throw my hat in the Veryon ring over here, and I've been here for about a year now. And that is me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for being here and providing your expertise on this subject. Also, Kim Watney, I'd like to introduce her and a few words, Kim.
Hi, Good day. I'm Kim Watney. I've been in this industry over 30 years. I started with a major carrier as a records clerk, where I did the filing and checking of the records, making sure that things were tracking correctly. If there was issues, I would take them into engineering. I started when everything was handwritten. It was a piece of paper and handwritten. So I can see the improvement, and I love that everything is now, you can put it on a computer. I've also had roles in sales. So I've done U.S. government sales. I've also done over-the-counter sales for a helicopter engine, accessory, core change exchanges, that kind of thing. I moved on into Veryon. I was also an operator like Justin. And we moved to Florida. My husband decided to retire. We moved to Florida. I was lucky to secure a job at Veryon in the quality department. And it's amazing what growth this company has done. And I think that we are on the right track. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So to start then, just firstly, great to see some comments coming in the public chat here. We've got a good mix of people. We've got North Carolina. We've got across the ocean in Lisbon as well, Carlos. Plenty of people joining San Jose. So thank you all so much. And again, any questions, please pop them into the Q&A section of the window that you'll see in front of you. So section 1, fears and myths about switching systems. Those dreaded words, the fear of what could happen if you switch system. And in a lot of cases, there are myths associated with that as well. And hopefully we can discuss some of those today. We're really interested in your thoughts and opinions on these topics too. So hopefully you'll see a poll appear on your screen at numerous times throughout this discussion. Please give us your opinions. We're really, really interested in them, and we'll hopefully bring some of those into discussion as well. So with that in mind, Justin, let's come to you first. In your experience when considering switching maintenance tracking softwares, what are some of the fears or concerns that you've had, or maybe that you see now as part of your current role?
I would say the compatibility and technology. A lot of times you have platforms that have tools that other platforms don't. Maybe some compatibility issues in the way you're tracking life-limited components before. For instance, like penalty factors, creep rates, things like that. Maybe one system does it one way, another system does it another way. Oftentimes, I've found that just finding, experimentation and figuring out the system itself often cures a lot of that, but then product development does a good job at adjusting on the fly. We have a really good product development team here at Veryon that does a great job at that. So really that's, I think, the biggest problem. And then I would say, or the biggest fear, and I would say that, figuring out just how to migrate the data from one program to the other. Sometimes the mapping doesn't work. Sometimes, coding is different. Major assemblies are built differently from one program to another. So I'd say, yeah, definitely the compatibility and technology part.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with all of those points. Kim, any thoughts?
No, I agree with Justin. You do have to be prepared to look at what you had and what you're getting into, because your screens are going to look different, and that can be confusing sometimes. I know when we changed it, that was one of the biggest things. It was like, oh, I really like that, but they don't have this. So it was just one of those things you just learn to train your brain to see things differently.
Yeah, and that, looking at the poll that's just come in as well, some of those results, one of those training, adaptation, and vendor support links into that, I think, Kim, there with that kind of adapting to a new system. And if we take a look at the highest polling item there, data loss or integrity issues, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about the data side of it and migration of data, because it's one of the huge points of it. One of the fears that I quite often hear is that transition upon go live. So what I mean by that is some approaches require, a really long parallel running of your legacy system and also your new solution together at the same time. And other options to jump in and just do a complete and immediate switch onto the new system. Kim, I'll come to you. What are your kind of thoughts on that cutoff, and what methods do you think work best when turning on a new tracking solution?
So when we went from our old tracking to our new tracking, I ran a report, I turned off the new system, and I never went back. I went right into the new tracking system. Our company, or the company that I worked for at the time, was organized. They did a 2-week, the records team got it so that they could verify that what was in the new system was correct. The aircrafts were green. And then we went live 2 weeks after that. So the mechanics had access to it after that. For me, that was the easiest way and simple, because I didn't have to worry about updating two systems, and I had a report. So once I had that report, I knew I could go back to, at the time it was February 1st, I could go back to February 1st and start over from there. But I also had my logbooks, so I could find anything I needed in my logbooks. So for me, that was the easiest way. Not everybody has that same thought process, but that's how I did it.
Yeah, and you're right. It's very polar opposites with people's approach to this. I love that approach. It's kind of throwing you in the deep end, isn't it? Where, hey, we've got a backup plan. We have a fallback here, so we're good to continue. Let's just get into it and push through.
Well, excuse me. It also forces you to learn the new system.
Right.
I learned that new system. People would come to me. It's like, how do you know this? Because I audited my aircraft. I did what I needed to do, and you learn.
Yeah, that's true. Justin, any thoughts around that? Do you agree with? Is there an approach that you find works better in terms of that transition period?
I've seen a few approaches. I mean, some of the past operators I worked for spread out quite a bit. Alaska, Hawaii, in the States. Oftentimes, running a parallel system gives some security, some backup. It also kind of, trains the operator in how to read the new system, right? Because things may be formatted differently, or things just may look different, right? They're inevitably going to. So I know in one of the past operations where we implemented a new program, it was an enterprise program instead of just a maintenance tracking program. So it took quite a bit of working the kinks out, the bugs out, and getting all of the different regions comfortable, providing them the training that was required. All of that, I've seen parallel systems run for a long period of time in that transition, and it's helped. But I agree with Kim also. I mean, I know that anytime I've had to use a system and been thrown into it, and like you said, sink or swim, it's, you learn it. You have to learn it. It's necessity. So, I mean, I think both approaches are good, and I've even used Excel spreadsheets, right? I've even built Excel spreadsheets and managing maintenance that allow me to cross-check and cross-reference, make sure that everything is enrolled correctly and schedules are forecasted properly in the tracking system. So the checks and balances are nice, but also the necessity of having to learn the new system really moves things along.
Yeah, agreed. I find that people's fear tends to cause them to stay with their existing tracking system, even if that current solution isn't really working for them, or even if it pushes their budget to somewhere they're a little bit uncomfortable with. And I think there's also a common myth that switching systems can devalue the aircraft. Do you think this is true? Do you think that those complete and accurate records can actually enhance the aircraft value rather than the other way around? Kim?
I think a well-documented aircraft does increase the value of your aircraft. I have seen aircraft being sold where the cockpit is full of aircraft records that go with the aircraft. I have seen them without it, and there's a difference in the price. So yes, I think a well-documented aircraft does add to the value.
Yeah, Justin?
Yeah, I agree entirely with that. I mean, there are many conformities and pre-buys I would have never made it through without a good reported, tracking system. So it definitely helps streamline that whole process rather than sitting, at a table in a conference room with, covered in paper and trying to weed through that. It's always been a seamless process, in my experience at least. It's been a seamless process that's helped tremendously with purchasing an aircraft as a new buyer, new operator who's trying to bring that aircraft onto their op spec or their certificate and having to go through those conformity processes. It's tremendously helpful. And it definitely, like to Kim's point, it always increases the value of the aircraft.
Yeah, and I suppose the other way of thinking about it is if you're using a tracking system that isn't working for you, or is an Excel-based system, or whatever it is you're coming from, if that data is no good or the software is not fit for purpose, then the value of the aircraft is going to be affected by that anyway. So switching to a new system that then solves that problem for you is only going to have a positive effect. And the poll agrees in the chat. Again, thank you everybody for your contributions there. Quite an overwhelming agreement there that it is a myth, really. It is false that the aircraft lose value by switching systems. I'm sure there are situations where that is the case and it does happen, but overwhelmingly, really, I think it's seen as more of a positive. And along that note, another potential fear: is there a need for any aircraft downtime when switching systems, or in most cases do you find that you can get away from that and have a seamless transition without actually affecting your flying schedules? And obviously everybody's going to have to put in a bit more work during the transition, but the aircraft themselves shouldn't be affected by that. Any different opinions there from you, Justin?
No, I think you said it. I think you said it perfectly. I mean, it's oh,
I think you just accidentally muted, Justin.
Oh, apologize.
You're back.
Where were we? Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, no problem at all. So is there a need for any aircraft downtime when switching between systems?
Right. No, as a matter of fact, typically anytime we've switched systems or bought an aircraft and brought it on certificate, you're going through a couple of months, couple of weeks at least of maintenance, preparing the aircraft for conformity. And that's a perfect time for that transition. And it actually helps with the process. So it kind of helps to do it simultaneously, in my opinion.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to documentation. And what kind of documents and records do you think are critical in maintaining that value of the aircraft? And I'll come to you, Kim. You talked a little bit before about those documents and the records, but what are those specific documents that are critical to keep the value of your aircraft? And how has a maintenance tracking system kept those records up to date?
Well, all of the records are important. So all of the maintenance records, all of the changes, part changes, tire changes, your wheels, any major changes, like you went from seats to a medical aircraft and you want to go back to your seats, you have to have all of that. All of that data has to be together. And all of it is important, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. And I suppose with that poll there, technically we should have an extra option there of all of the above, because I know we're wanting to try and see what the general kind of overwhelming response is there, but ultimately it is across the board, in that we need the logs to be accurate, engines, airframes, and you need all of the ADs to be up to date and all of that stuff. Justin, anything further on that one, of any specific documentation you think that really is critical?
I mean, obviously, life limited component historical information is critical, especially like engine build data sheets, status reports from overhauls and whatnot. Also, any STCs with associated ICAs, any of that. Again, like Kim said, all of it is incredibly important, and it's critical to the effective maintenance tracking of the aircraft.
Yeah, agreed. And taking a look at that poll again, it is quite an overwhelming response to that, which I'm surprised at. I thought it would be quite spread out, but up-to-date engine and aircraft logbooks has come out as close to 80% of our listeners' answers here, which I think makes sense. We all agree that airworthiness directives and making sure that they're all in place, but without those logs, we don't really have a starting point. We don't know where we're at in terms of maintenance. We don't know where we're at in terms of life codes against the aircraft, flying hours, landings. So I think that's pretty accurate response to the poll there. Okay, I think we'll move on to section 2. Which is where we get more into detail about that data migration process. So from my experience, this has been the biggest focus point of a transition between systems, because you can't take bad data and put bad data into a new system. Regardless of how good that system is, you've still got bad data. So if you forgive my pronunciation of the way I say data, but ultimately, I think data migration practices plays a huge part in this. So let's talk about that. And on the topic of data, what are some of the steps you've taken when migrating data to ensure a smooth and efficient transition? Kim?
When I did ours, it was actually it was very smooth, but they were organized enough that they had already scanned all the documents by year, and they separated the engines from the airframe, from the propellers. So when I made the migration of the data from the shared drive to the document folder in the system, it made it much easier for the team so that everybody could go to one system and find what they needed. So if you were working, it was 2:00 in the morning and you needed to go back 6 months to see whatever, you could see that without having to call somebody in the middle of the night and wake them up and get the answer. Your answer was there. It took me I had 13 aircraft, and I think it took me maybe 30 days to get all of them done, but it was the easy process. It was something that was crucial for the team so that everybody could still work together and function. We didn't have to worry about not being able to find anything because it was all there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And having that reference document, being able to pull everything and know that everybody's using the same place as well. It's a huge point. Justin, anything from your side in terms of steps or tips of ensuring that smooth and efficient transition of data?
Yeah, I mean, data mapping is huge, right? It's one of the bigger challenges too, in my opinion. And really, what it takes is technical expertise, understanding of two things that are worded differently might actually be the same thing, and mapping that compliance data from one platform to another. That's often challenging, but if you can understand, if you can read between the lines and understand all of the technical lingo and whatnot, it makes for a more seamless transition. But that's definitely the biggest challenge. And, there's different methodologies in approaching it. But again, I think it comes down to having the right technical expertise to understand what it is that one system's saying to another so that you can make the two talk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, thinking back, I've worked on hundreds of implementations over the last 10 years when I was in the onboarding and customer success team. And there's a memorable customer, I'll never forget it. And it kind of brings back to one of your comments earlier, Kim. This customer was using paper log cards. And it's the only one I've come across where it was pure paper log cards. They didn't use Excel for anything. Everything was paper log cards. And some questionable handwriting as well to go alongside that. And that's not ideal when you're trying to distinguish a serial number, whether it's an S or whether it's a 5. So I think that transition for me from into an electronic system was more of a challenge because the data initially had to be transposed into electronic format at the very least. That's where you have to start. And then you have to try and make sure that you've transposed that data correctly. Now, that example is quite extreme and quite unusual. And once you've dealt with a project like that, I think the rest are fairly easy. I think most data nowadays is in some form of electronic format, whether it is being managed in Excel or, and you're looking for more functionality and wanting to bring that across. But what are some of the benefits of using automated tools and technologies for that data migration? And can you provide any examples of tools that have been particularly effective, Kim?
I just everything was already done, so mine was just a drag and drop. So, and then I would go back into the system and update as needed. So my tools were very prehistoric compared to what Justin knows, I'm sure. But mine were all Excel. Mine was very simple. Right. I was very lucky.
Good. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, it's Excel is the way to go if you can, right? It's very easy to map everything. But yeah, it's I would say that the migration process in automation, a way that it really helps too, like automated tools, like you can design tools that really capture most of the data out of an Excel based platform, right? And it kind of maintains that data integrity, I think, because you're not doing the interpretation of the data. You're not having to read through the lingo and try to map things. So I think automation is huge because it definitely cuts down on the enrollment time and the onboarding times. But automation for scheduling too is helpful. So Excel, most programs are Excel based now. So there's a lot of tools out there that you can use to extract it. And it definitely speeds up the onboarding time. But more importantly, I think it increases the data integrity and helps you maintain everything coming from one system to the other.
Yeah, and I think having things in Excel gives you that ability to do that data cleansing part of the, I say requirement. Not everybody does it. It's always my recommendation that it's done as part of the process of moving from one system to another, is do some or allocate some time to do some data cleansing, just to make sure that, it's the prime opportunity. It's very hard to take a legacy system and change too much in there, because a lot of things are linked to other things in the system. And ultimately, once you have that data out in a flexible tool such as Excel, doing that data cleansing during that time, I think is the prime opportunity. And then, it's mapping those fields then is so much easier when the data's in something like Excel into any tracking system. Predominantly, a lot of the tracking systems out there, including Veryon tracking, it allows you to, the data is loaded through these using templates and using these tools. So ultimately, I think it's the best way of using technology to your advantage is to get it into a format that can be very flexible. Moving into talking a little bit about different departments, and Kim, again, you touched upon this slightly, is letting everybody have access to that data for during the migration process. And across departments, I think is a good talking point. We know that, for example, if you're looking after the aircraft, you're concerned about part numbers and serial numbers, but also the warehousing and procurement team. And these do need to tally up and they need to talk to each other. So in a lot of situations, you have two different departments who are actually managing the same data, and you can't get away from that. Your part master may be managed by your procurement team, but ultimately we can't have a different part master that is used for the aircraft. So how crucial is it, Kim, is that involvement from different departments during the data migration process? And is there any tips or things you've learned from those departments working together?
I do know that when we did change over, that the procurement department did stay on the second system longer than the maintenance team, just so that they could do the checks and balances, because it took longer. But we took everything from their system and worked from it. And then after I had the aircraft in, then I would go in and I would audit all the aircraft and verify part number and serial number. I just had to run a list, and I could just check. It takes time, but not that much time. You just have to be able to not have any interruptions so that you can just check. It actually worked pretty slick. It was nice.
Perfect. Justin, any comments on that?
No, I'd say that the interdepartment communication between maintenance and your vendor that's running your platform is, that continued communication is really important, because when coming onto a system, a lot of times, you have old data, you have things that's outdated, you have things that may not even be on the aircraft anymore. So I think that constant communication with the maintenance crew and, just like to Kim's point, continually auditing everything you may have in your inventory system or procurement system, with, working with the maintenance department to confirm all of that. That's a big part of the enrollment process and the data cleansing, like you were referencing, Peter.
Perfect.
And one more point. Sorry. I could also, if the part number was showing on the aircraft or dedicated to that stockroom, I could go through the logbook and verify that it had been removed and it was gone. So it was time. You could clean up a lot of the old questions, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm just going to take a very quick pivot to one of the questions coming from Rick. Thanks for the question, Rick. Would another option be better than having Gulfstream's maintenance tracking for Gulfstream aircraft? Would there be another option that's better than using that? Very open-ended potential, lots of answers here, but I'll throw it over to you, Kim.
I'm not sure. Would another option be better than having Gulfstreams?
Or you, Justin, if you want to jump in.
I don't. I'm not real. I mean, I know CMP is a camp-owned product now, and I know that that's kind of closed off to a lot of the rest of the market. But I don't think there's really a solid answer out there for that yet. I think that's something that everyone is working on.
Yeah. Agreed. And I suppose another question is, especially mixed fleets. So if you have more than just Gulfstream aircraft, then you'd be potentially better off in a more generic system, in terms of a system that isn't tied to one specific aircraft type. So yeah, I mean, we can happy to provide more information, and we can also give you some specifics regarding that in comparison to, for example, tracking, which is Veryon system. So we'll get back to you on that. But thank you for the question.
Yeah,
right,
I do know we have quite a few Gulfstream on our system, and they seem to be quite happy. So
yep, fair comment.
I'm just going with that.
Yeah, no, agreed. So yeah, happy to have a chat with you regarding that. I think it's interesting, and certainly something we can discuss with you, the pros and cons of that. Okay, moving into section 3. This is focused a little bit more around the specific benefits here of changing up your system. We're going to throw a poll question in here as well, and asking you guys what do you think is the most significant benefit of switching to a new maintenance tracking system? So is it purely based on costs and being able to improve that resource allocation that you have? Is it flexibility and scalability, being able to move as your operations grow? Enhanced data management and accuracy. Maybe your legacy system has provided some overfly situations or situations in which the data has been inaccurate coming out of it. Improved decision making and operational efficiency, or all of the above. In an ideal world, I'm sure it's all of the above. I'm certainly going with that option. But taking a look at that and just asking you two now. We talked about how comprehensive data and records can add to the value of an aircraft. Let's also discuss some of the benefits of switching to an all-in-one maintenance tracking solution. So what do you think are the top benefits you've observed when switching to a more kind of modern maintenance tracking system compared to a legacy system? We'll go to you, Justin.
I mean, the immediate benefit that I've always recognized in switching programs, especially from a legacy to a more modernized system, is A, the automation, but B, just the tools that might be behind the scenes, right? Like improved templates are a big part of all of that, capturing all of the data. And, you have the opportunity when switching systems to really audit everything that's tracking on your aircraft. I know from personal experience, switching from one program to another, exposing, perhaps ICAs that weren't tracking for an STC and hadn't been tracking for years. Obviously, that's the kind of things you want to be able to capture, and those kind of things, a lot of those things, when it comes to like OEM inspection programs, a lot of the things that you may have been missing in a previous system, or the system lacked the ability to track it, lacked the functionality, a lot of times that's exposed when switching to a newer system. So you're able to find a lot of discrepancies and a lot of anomalies when switching to a more modern, streamlined system.
Yep, understood. Kim, your inputs, please.
So I agree with everything that Justin said. It's also the system that we switched from and switched to, you could actually see on time. So you could update the system and everybody could see it that day. Where before we were sending documents in, we had to wait 24 hours. So we got to see everything. The nice that was awesome, because it made reporting quicker, it made planning quicker, it made inventory quicker. It was just, when you have an all-around program that everybody can use and see on time, it's a happier day, really, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it makes complete sense. What I find with the process of switching and involving all different departments together, and it comes across quite frequently, is that every department, of course, has their list of things that they want to get out of the system and the benefits that they want to have. What a lot of people don't realize is that some of that can come with extra responsibilities for other departments. So if, for example, you are wanting to get better reliability reporting or whatever it is, that may involve the goods in receiving clerk to do an extra step, because they now, as part of the new process, need to record X, Y, and Z. So I think people often will look at that as a negative and think, oh, but that means we have to do more. And we see this quite often in during the implementation or onboarding process. But ultimately, what that's actually doing for the whole and the bigger picture is huge, and is offering a lot more functionality. So there's a lot of wants and wish lists, but there also, you have to consider as well, there are some things that may affect your role for the good of the kind of bigger picture as well. Just some of my thoughts there. Any comments on that, either of the two of you?
I do know for month end, the reporting system is very helpful. It's because before it was, you had to add this and you had to look at this and you had to go here. Now you can just run a report and everything's there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something else I'd like to add to the, moving to a more modern system is the automation part of forecasting, right? One of the biggest problems that, run into with some of these legacy systems is that, phasing or block inspection type schedules, everything has to be manually captured and everything has to be manually added. and forecasts change each time you add compliance to something. That automation is really huge and essential, in my opinion, in effectively managing your maintenance and planning it. Because anytime you're to miss any of those manual entries or manual calculations for scheduling and forecasting, it presents an opportunity of an overflight, and that's obviously what we're trying to prevent in planning maintenance.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've talked about some of the benefits there. There's obviously a huge list of them in terms of visibility for management in a lot of cases. Some of the legacy systems just don't provide that. And having everything integrated into an all-in-one solution is huge. Quite frequently, from my role in sales, we find that we are talking to customers who are using 3, 4, 5, 6 solutions that could actually all be broken down into 1 or 2. But it's that fear of replacing multiple solutions and bringing it into one system there. So on that note, what are some of the challenges that organizations face when trying to scale their system, and how can new systems address these? I think maybe a good starting point here is scalability. Of course, with a lot of legacy systems, that's a lot more difficult. That could be because the systems are fat client versions, so they're harder to scale. You need physical servers to be set up, and doing that just isn't an easy process. Whereas with a more modern scalable solution, many of which are held on the cloud, scalability and increasing that is as quick as a touch of a button. But yeah, interested to get your thoughts on some of the challenges that organizations face, and how new systems can address these. Kim?
Well, there's always going to be challenges. It's, from my opinion, organization, being organized, knowing, having your steps, having your people in line, have your checklist, know your steps. So you got to send your data over, you got to get it migrated, so on and so forth. It's working together and moving on. Justin, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I second that. I would say that a lot of times the challenges with like system integration is kind of what I was referencing earlier, is that say you bring a new maintenance tracking platform on, or you sign on to one, and you start working with their inventory system, right? And it starts exposing things that you weren't necessarily tracking properly before, or that you weren't tracking at all. I think that the flip side of that is, like, I think when you have like an inventory system that's integrated with your maintenance tracking platform, or e-log books or work orders or whatever, I think that it's challenging the biggest challenge is trying to adapt to the way everything ties together, in terms of integration. So it's definitely challenging, but I think the benefits of it outweigh it. I think there's a lot of times that you find with a more modern tracking program and software, I think you end up exposing so much that you didn't know. You don't know what you don't know, And I think that system integration really helps identify those items.
Yeah. You said something really interesting there about data potentially something that there's something that maybe you weren't tracking before, and now you need it as part of the new system. So let's say we're going from a legacy system and we're coming into a new shiny modern system. The modern system requires you to track, let's say, I don't know, ATA code, for example. How do you approach that when your legacy system didn't? We want to get the most out of the new system, and to do that, we want to provide all of the data we can. Without that data, then we're potentially losing a bit of functionality. Is that purely just a manual process of having to go through those and fill in those gaps, or is there other ways we can do that Justin?
If there's other ways to do that, I'd like to know about it. It's definitely a very, very manual process because it takes intuition, and it really takes analytical approach, So I don't think there's any, golden answer, but I think it's definitely a manual process that's essential.
Yeah, agreed. And as I said, to get the most functionality and to get the benefits of moving to a system, sometimes there has to be a little bit of give and take and a little bit of work. And again, it all kind of boils down to that data cleansing process and making sure that we're putting as much good data into a new system as possible. Just doubling back on the latest poll question here. So the poll question that went out was, how does a new maintenance tracking system enhance scalability and adaptability to changing business needs compared to legacy systems? It's a bit of a split vote here. So mostly around greater adaptability for changing business needs. So I think what we're saying here is the organization is evolving, getting more complex, and requires more functionality behind the system that we're using. But then also a big one here, improved system integration. And that is a huge one. A lot of legacy systems do not have that integration ability. We are in a world where, whilst you can still have a one-stop solution for managing of your maintenance tracking, there are still elements that will need to be interfaced, such as your ERP, maybe a dedicated HR or quality system that you need to integrate to. So that's really interesting comments there in the poll, and I agree. I think those are the two kind of biggest points there to talk about. So a little bit more about system integration, I suppose, there. And this is a Q&A question that I had as well, which refers to when interfaces are required to other systems, when is the best time to get these integrations put into place? In your opinion, is it better to let's get the maintenance tracking system up and running, let's have a bit of a manual process alongside that of data transfer between other systems, and once we're in a stable position and the system's up and running, then we look at the interfaces? Or do you think it's more important to, okay, let's look at any interfaces we need and get them in place right from the beginning? So interesting to get your opinion, putting you under a bit of pressure of changing the topic there a little bit, but let's get to you, Kim.
I'm one of those, I like to just do it all at one time.
I've got that impression of you.
Yeah. Well, because I'm one of those, I make a checklist and I follow it. Or I'll do one aircraft. If I happen to have a fleet of 8 aircraft and they're all the same, I will audit one aircraft and then take that aircraft to audit the others. So if I have one perfect one, then I can keep going. But I would say to do it all at one time, because nobody likes changes. So get through them all at one time.
Yeah, Justin, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal to get through everything at once. But I think oftentimes, integration, it's kind of a fluid thing, right? Sometimes you don't know you need things integrated until, you're X amount of years in. I mean, those things are always adapting and changing, and, things you didn't know you needed 2 years ago, you need now. I mean, we even do that with, basic aircraft templates. Those are constantly going to be updated and modified and will be 10 years from now. I think it's the same thing with system integrations. You put things out in the live operational world, and, all of a sudden, you need something today that you didn't need yesterday. So I think that it's, I think like Kim said, ideally you'd get everything done at once, but I think that it's just part of the nature of the beast, kind of.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And it's a really difficult one. It obviously depends on the complexity of the interfaces as well. You can have some that are really have multiple touch points and all touch points are potential failure points. It's whether that pain of doing a bit of a manual process for a short time outweighs the benefits you get from holding off and doing it once everybody's comfortable and is using a system. Right, let's move into some more rapid fire things. So let's go into section 4, which is hot takes of this or that. So no pressure, guys, but I'm going to come to you with a couple of this or that scenarios. Just a quick answer on those, and then maybe a sentence or two to give you reasoning behind it. So let's start with you, Justin. So operational efficiency, real-time updates for system integration, or scheduled system checks? You're on mute, just to let you know. And it could be just because you're thinking of the answer.
Nope, I was on mute. Thank you. I would say scheduled. I think that that you're talking about like automation versus manual, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. I would say scheduled, just because automation scares me. I like to get hands on things. I mean, I'm data quality here at Veryon, right? So I like to see everything. I like to process everything. I like to dig in and analyze everything. So for me, it's still scheduled, it's still manual, it's still, periodic spot checking, auditing, things like that.
Okay, great. And now for you, Kim, streamline workflows with integration features or enhance flexibility with customizable settings?
Well, you changed them. I was going to go with real time, because real time for me is the most important, because with real time, you can see that your flights are correct. You can verify that the pilots put the times in correctly. You can see what maintenance is coming up, and you can check your do list and know that it's correct.
Yep. Okay. Next one we'll move into, and I'll come back to you, Justin. Data export and import techniques. So automated data transfers or manual data uploads for better control?
So
it can only be one.
I want to say both really badly, because, obviously automated is quicker, more efficient. But again, the quality side of me wants to say I need to comb over everything, right? And everything needs to be manual. So I love the automation idea, but it's again, I don't have entire confidence in it yet. I still need to see things.
Understood. And I'll do the same question to you, Kim. So what do you think? Automated or manual data uploads?
I'm going to go manual.
Okay.
When we did our change, that's when I found lots of errors. And you had a 10-year item that had a 192-month adjustment on it. We would have overflown all of those aircraft with just not looking. So manual.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think just in your first comment of both is relevant. There needs to be, and there should be, a manual process. But we can now use tools to help us with that, and to at least do part of the job. So it's a bit of a trick question, I suppose, there. Okay, last couple before we move into the last 5 minutes, and we'll get through some of the questions and answers that have come through during this session. So API integrations, API, everybody loves saying API. So the this or that for this one to you, Justin, is scheduled data synchronizations or on-demand data uploads. Which do you prefer? Which do you think is more relevant? Or does it depend on what data or what information we're transferring? You're on mute.
Sorry. Can you please repeat that? I need to dig into that.
Sure. So scheduled data syncs. So you have an API with a certain system, and we have it scheduled to run once a week at midnight on a Sunday, which is a nice time. Or do you think on-demand data synchronizations are better that are triggered by a user?
I think on demand would obviously be better, but I think that scheduled is more realistic and efficient. It goes back to, the automation versus manual. I mean, when scheduled, you have time to plan, you have time to map out, you have time to stage, whereas automated, you don't always know what you're going to get until after the fact.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, last one for this one, because we are moving into the last few minutes. Vendor support is critical for smooth transitions, or just helpful but not essential? Kim?
Vendor support is always helpful, but it was not, for us, it was not crucial.
Mm-hmm. And any differing opinion there, Justin?
I think it depends on your operation. I think it can be. Sometimes you don't have 5 minutes of the day to dedicate to logging into a computer when you're maintaining aircraft.
Right.
So in that case, vendor support is essential. But to Kim's point, you can be self-managed and do everything yourself. I think it really just depends on, personnel, your bandwidth, and your operation.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we've got a few minutes left, and I don't want to keep you any longer than the scheduled time. So questions. If there's anything that you want to ask, then please put it into the Q&A. I'll go through a few of those that are in there now. Larry has asked, Camp changed their task cards to CMP format, and it is awful. I agree. Is Veryon tailoring their program to one specific platform or OEM? So I can answer that. We don't tailor to a specific OEM. We have fleets that are varying, but we can certainly have somebody provide you with some more information on that, Larry. Unless Justin or Kim, is there anything you can add to that? No. Okay, so yeah, we'll get one of our product team to have a chat with you, Larry, and just give you a bit of information. But ultimately, we aren't specific to an OEM. Our task cards are lovely, not awful. So I'm biased. Hey, okay. Next question is from Brandon. Kim, can you explain more on that error you encountered?
Sure.
That was just referring back. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So we went from one system to the new system, and we were doing our audits. And when I was doing the audit, I always check the threshold, and I always check if there's any tolerance. And for some reason, an error had transferred over. So the error was in the old tracking system that transferred over to the new system. Had I not seen that or done the audit and done the homework, we would have missed that. And 7 of the Pilatus would have overflown. So it was right there in black and white. You have to do your homework.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I'll do one more question, and then we've got pretty much time up there. So how can I deal with the reluctance to change from my team? And teams who may be a little stuck in their ways about change and about different processes. Justin?
Oh, boy. Conflict resolution and demonstration. You really have to, I mean, it really goes back and comes down to training and explanation, being able to really get into nuts and bolts and weeds with people, because a lot of times the reluctance and the apprehension comes from a lack of understanding. So if you can find a way to effectively break down, train, and understand, or present everything in a way that can be understood, I think that's key.
I agree, and I think management level buy-in and pushing the benefits that that everyone will have from a new system is key. It has to come from the top. But on that note, thank you so much to the two of you. Justin, Kim, it's been really interesting talking to you both and putting the world to rights about switching systems and data migration and lots of other things. And thank you to everybody in the chat for questions, and please do contact us for any more information. We hope you found it interesting and useful and valuable to your time. So back to you, Elena. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Peter, and thank you to our panelists for a great conversation today.